Good evening to all of you on Kontestacja Internet Radio. This is Krzysztof Maczyński, or Chris for short, speaking from Bielsko-Biała in Poland. It's past 6 p.m. on Friday, the 5th of April 2013. And what we're starting now is a special episode of the live show Gość, miesiąca, which is Polish for guest of the month. This episode is special because it's in English, and it's also special because our guest today is very special. The guest is Frank Karsten. Hello.
Hello.
Frank Karsten from the Netherlands, or more specifically,
Amsterdam.
Amsterdam. And Frank Karsten is the author of the book Beyond Democracy, and he's also the founder of the Dutch Mises Institute recently, and before that Stichting Meer Vrijheid, which is in English Foundation More Freedom. Right?
Yes, that is correct.
And what we're going to talk about today is, well, the book, its content, of course, and freedom from the Dutch perspective. How it looked like, what it looked like historically in that country, what the current situation and activities are, and what the future holds both for the Dutch and for all of us in Europe. But to begin with, I make a few announcements. The first one is that you may join us as usually. You can call us and join our conversation to ask your question for Frank. You can do it by calling on Skype, kontestacja.com. I'll spell it kontestacja.com. That's the username on Skype. Or you can do it using a phone, which would be, if you have to prefix it with an international code, that's +48 for Poland, and then 222 195 321. I'll repeat it, 222 195 321. And you can also join us on chat, which is at chat.kontestacja.com. And I'll see if there are already some people there. Well, there you can chat in Polish or in English as you wish. But if you call us, then please use the English language, because that's the language in which we're talking today. So, Frank, are you ready for the first question, which was sent by our listener Jezier by email?
Yes.
Well, the first question is, what is freedom? What does it mean to you? How do you
freedom means, for me, freedom means the right to spend your own money and the fruits of your labor, and to have autonomy regarding your body and your religion. So freedom of speech, freedom to use drugs if you like. So freedom to marry whoever you like. So to have personal autonomy. I know there are many other people that have different definitions of freedom, but this is the libertarian idea of freedom.
Well, I continue with a few advertisements which are important, so I make them both now and at the end of the hearing. It's the important information is that Frank is coming to Poland next month for the Asbiro seminar, and you can still join the seminar with a lower price. The lower price is until the 15th, if I remember correctly, until the 15th of April. You can visit www.asbiro.pl, and the seminar, the key speakers will be Frank Karsten and Hans-Hermann Hoppe. So the next question is about your book. Why did you write it, and what does it contain? What's the purpose of writing such a book?
Well, first, I was a proponent of democracy 15 years ago, and then I became a libertarian, and I was not so enthusiastic anymore about democracy. I read the book by Hans Hermann Hoppe, and I read some articles too, libertarian articles regarding democracy, and then I thought, that was in 2002 or something, oh, well, democracy is not that good. But a few years ago, I thought of these myths regarding democracy, and I thought, oh, this is actually very powerful. And I knew there was, as I knew then and now, there was no easy to read, very structured book regarding democracy and the criticism on democracy regarding freedom, and why it doesn't work, and why it is also immoral. So, together with my co-author, Karl Beckman, I then wrote the book Beyond Democracy, and it has been quite successful, certainly for a book with a political philosophy content. It's been translated into 10 languages now, among which Polish. And yes, it does get good reviews. And indeed, people say, well, it's very easy to read. So it's for the average person. And of course, like I said, there was this other book with the same message pretty much, but focusing on different matters like monarchy. And that was the book by Hans Hermann Hoppe, but that is a collection of academic essays, and this is for the average person, so that's quite different.
You mean Democracy, the God That Failed?
Yes. Didn't I say that?
Could you repeat?
Yes, it is Democracy, the God That Failed. It's also by the same publisher as Beyond Democracy, published in Polish, and yes. It is a very good book, but not so much for the average reader, I think. It's more academic.
Oh yeah,
Beyond Democracy, it's really for your mother or friends or whatever.
The Polish title of your book is Mity Demokracji, and it was published by Fior Publishing. So you
yes.
can buy it, and it's highly recommendable. And well, I hope that this show will encourage you to actually do so and to go to the seminar with Frank next month, and with Hans Hermann Hoppe, of course. So let's turn to the main part of this show. That is the freedom in the Netherlands. How did it start? Was the beginning of the Dutch country related to the love of freedom by people living there, or did it happen in some other way?
I can tell you something about the history of economic and personal freedom in the Netherlands. The Netherlands was actually a world power despite its small size, in the 17th century. We also call it the Golden Century, because we were very successful. We traded, we had colonies. That might not be a good thing, maybe, but we had a world empire, and we were economically very successful, and many people flocked to the Netherlands because of the religious freedom people could have here, and the economic freedom and the freedom of press. So that was the catalyst of our success at that time. And that declined after a while, and England or United Kingdom took over that role.
I think also Poland at some time took over that role. Beginning from the 16th century, we also were known in Europe for liberty and for the rules and laws that didn't discriminate against people of other nationalities or religions. For example,
yes.
the King Zygmunt August in the 16th century proclaimed, "I'm not the king of your consciences." And later, when a monarch asked the aristocracy to join his efforts, his war efforts in preparations to defend the country. They said that first he has to warrant them some freedoms that were curtailed or were planned to be curtailed, because when those freedoms are curtailed, the country not warranting them is not worth fighting for.
I see. Nowadays, I'm not a historian, but nowadays there are still some freedoms that the Netherlands is pretty much known for, and is actually also a pioneer. And I am talking about drug laws, which are rather relaxed here. It's not totally. There's no complete freedom of using drugs or selling them or buying them or using them. But still, it is much better than in a country like France or the United States, for instance. There is no war on drugs in the Netherlands. Although people who grow marijuana, in large quantities, they are visited by the police, and they get fines or imprisonment as a result. Another thing is that we have gay rights. We have pioneered that pretty much too with gay marriages. Euthanasia. The Netherlands is also very known for its position on euthanasia. Although still this is not completely free. It is far more possible than in other countries. And also, we're one of the first countries, I think, that legalized prostitution, which is rather interesting, because nowadays the progressives want to abolish that freedom, like in Sweden, Norway, and Iceland. So, yes.
In Poland, prostitution is also legal, but it's illegal to profit from another person's prostitution. So you can't be a manager of prostitutes, or you can't run a house which...
You cannot be a pimp, as they say.
Yes.
I see.
But prostitution is legal and it's not taxed, so it's a basis for some tax avoiding scheme.
I see.
You say that you were paid this money for your sexual services, and then the tax office doesn't bother you anymore. They're planning to change it, of course, because they're planning to be able to request a statement from the person who received those services that he or she actually paid for them the amount of money that you claim to have obtained. You said about gay marriages as some freedom that
yes.
the Netherlands grant to their citizens. Well, actually, it's controversial among libertarians even, because what does the state have to do with marriages with marital status at all? Wouldn't it be better to not to make gay marriages legal, but not to recognize marriages in any way whatsoever, to just make it a private agreement, maybe granted by some church or by some secular organization to persons?
I agree completely, of course. I mean, there should be separation between marriage and the state, just like between religion and the state. But still, although it's not ideal, it is certainly an improvement for gay people compared to other countries. So that's what I wanted to convey.
Okay,
it's not ideal. It's much better, I think.
Can they adopt children?
I'm not sure yet, but yes, I think so. I'm not gay myself, but so I don't know much about it. But I think they can, yes.
Okay, and you also mentioned marijuana. Marijuana is legal to. It's legal to have marijuana and to consume it, but not to grow and sell it, right?
Yes, well,
except for places that have a license for that.
You're not allowed to grow it in large quantities, but of course there are many coffee shops not far from where I live, and yeah, well, they're not bothered by the police so much. I mean, they're not round up or locked up and closed down.
They are licensed, right? They have to obtain a license for selling marijuana, and
I think so.
Only that the Dutch are allowed to buy marijuana at those.
Well, in the areas at the border, we have a lot of drug tourists, and they cause some nuisance, according to the people who live there. So the mayors of the municipalities there, they want to restrict that. So you needed a pass that was only given to Dutch people to be able to buy drugs. But of course, this didn't work, so they abolished that again. And but I think in Amsterdam, everyone is allowed to buy here. But sometimes politicians raise the idea to start with restrictions regarding only the Dutch being able to buy drugs. So to prevent foreigners from coming here.
Is it only marijuana or also other drugs?
I am not expert, but I know that you can. I'm sure you can easily get other drugs and like cocaine or heroin or ecstasy. But I don't know the legality of it. But there might be laws against it. But in practice, it is fairly much freer than or less restricted than or enforced than in other countries. I mean, in the United States, you can be locked up just for small offenses regarding drugs.
Yes.
And here in the Netherlands, I've never heard of that.
That's where the prohibition and war on drugs, starting with marijuana, actually began in the United States.
Yes.
Because producers of artificial materials for clothing lobbied for that, because it was too much competition for them. Namely, Lamont Dupont, the owner of such factories of artificial materials, you said about other European countries having stricter laws. How would you compare the situation in the Netherlands to Portugal, where they legalized not only marijuana but all drugs in 2001? It's still illegal to sell them, so you still have like a black market, but it's legal to have them and to consume them, all of them. And
but I'm sure
the quoted statistic is that the consumption of all drugs dropped since then, actually.
Oh, that's fantastic. Yes, I had an article here in the German Spiegel magazine, which was very favorable, I think, towards the liberalization of drugs in Portugal. But like you said, it is not completely free. It's just free to use them, to consume them, and maybe to have them, but probably not in large quantities, because if you have them in large quantities, you're probably a dealer or a producer. So maybe it's quite comparable. I have no knowledge about the Portuguese situation so much, but it might be quite comparable to the Dutch situation. And I live in the center of, or I live pretty much in the center of Amsterdam, but I know very few people in my personal circle that actually use drugs. So you might be right that once you legalize drugs, like in Portugal, it loses its appeal. Of course, that should not be the reason, the sole reason or the main reason to liberalize drugs, because, of course, you have a personal freedom to do so, even if it's detrimental to you.
Yes, volenti non fit iuria, as they already said in ancient Rome. That is, to the willing one, no harm is done. And, I remind you that you're listening to Guest of the Month, a show of the Contestacja Internet Radio, and that you may call us, you may join our conversation and ask your own questions using either Skype, then the login is contestacja.com, or a phone, which is +48 for Poland, then 222-195-321. You can do it at any time. We'll pick you, we'll answer your call, and you'll join our conversation. And you can also join the chat at chatczat.contestacja.com. And greetings to Lukas Smal, who just joined the chat. Well, so the next round of questions is about, well, historically and at present, what are the influences of various systems of government, like democracy, monarchy, people's republics, like they have in communist countries, and we had until recently also in Poland, on the market, on the freedom to sell and to produce and to buy whatever you like. Which forms of governments are more likely to foster that, and which are detrimental to that?
Of course, I can mostly speak about democracy itself, which is pretty much a world religion. Everybody believes in democracy. There are only a few countries in the world that do not claim to be democracies, which is the Vatican, for instance, or Saudi Arabia. Hans Hermann Hoppe has written about monarchy in his book, Democracy, the God That Failed, in which he says that, as far as I think, that the monarchy is actually, it might be better than democracy, because you have a sole ruler, and there is less redistribution. And also the ruler has knows that his property, the country, will be inherited by his children. So he has far more long-term interest than the short-term interest that is the basis of most democracies. And but I'm not an expert on the historical situation of monarchies. I know about.
Even though you still have monarchy in the Netherlands.
Yes, but we have a new king will be put on the throne this month, at the end of the month, but our king has rather little influence, or little power. She does have, or our queen, I must say, she does have some powers, but as far as I know, it's quite limited, and many people want to limit that even further, and to change it into a more ceremonial function or position. So I think Hans Hermann Hoppe really has a point that a monarchy tends to lead to more long-term strategies or policies. And of course, another advantages of monarchy over democracy is that nowadays we do not distrust the power anymore. I mean, the people in power, the rulers, because we associate ourselves with the rulers, and democracy is sold as a system in which the people rule. So you don't have to be so suspicious of rulers anymore. And in a monarchy, you have a clear distinction between the two. So it's much more likely that that people will be antagonistic towards it. But let's talk about democracy, because the book doesn't really explain anything about monarchy, really. It does say a lot about democracy.
Before that, we still have a question from Marius, which is about monarchy. If it's considered the best alternative to democracy, which kind of monarchy would you describe as the best possibility? A parliamentary monarchy with a parliament, whereby the monarch is a ceremonial representative of the state mostly. A constitutional monarchy or an absolute monarchy?
Well, I didn't say, and I'm not in favor of a monarchy over democracy necessarily. I mean, I'm not saying that it is necessarily better. I'm just saying what another libertarian and another person who wrote about democracy wrote in his own book. It does appeal to me. But in our book, we don't say that monarchy, we should replace democracy with monarchy. Actually, I know of a monarchy, or it's actually a principality, that is Liechtenstein. It's also a democracy, but the Prince Hans Adam or Alois, he has advanced powers to dissolve government and to veto laws. Of course, it's a very successful country, but I don't think it's necessarily successful because it's a monarchy. I just think it's successful because it's very small, and that is the alternative we propose in the book. But we'll get to that more later on. But no, to sum up the answer is I'm not in favor of democracy or monarchy over democracy per se.
Well, actually, the first democracies were those in the Greek polis, small states like a city and its surroundings in ancient Greece. And it worked usually quite well, much better than nowadays in large countries where you hardly ever meet any people in power because they reside in the capital and, there are many levels of administration separating you from where the decisions are actually made.
Yes, of course. Well, Athens was, of course, a city-state, which with not so many inhabitants, so it's much easier to. There's not such a large gap between ruler and ruled. Whereas, for instance, in Poland with 38 million people, I think, or
like that.
Yes, in the Netherlands, 17 million. There's enormous, gap, divide between the ruler and the ruled.
Yes, and there are some states which still follow this model of small authorities governed in a very democratic way, like Switzerland with their cantons. Which is a confederation formally still, and there's also there were police authorities like that in Italy, especially in northern Italy throughout the Middle Ages. Until now, still one of them exists. It's San Marino.
Yes, it's one of those mini states in the world.
The Netherlands, there are many inhabitants there, but it's a small country.
Well, geographically speaking, it is small, yes. But, it's one of the most densely populated countries in the world. So, in that regard, it's not so small anymore. But still, compared to the rest of the world, it's pretty small, yes, indeed.
So in your book, you write about democracy in the contemporary world, or do you also base your thoughts on some examples, from the past, or do you also venture into the future possibilities of evolution of this system?
Of democracy, you mean?
Yes, democracy.
Examples from the past. Well, in most countries, we don't we don't mention the Athenian democracies of ancient times. We focus pretty much on the parliamentary democracies of the Western world for the last 100 years. We've had democracy in general suffrage since 1915, I think, in the Netherlands, and I think that applies also to most other Western countries. And we look at the trends in taxes, in regulation, in freedoms, in size also during that period. So the democracy has taken a big step towards higher taxes, more regulation, enormous bloated law, and also a larger and larger scale. And so, and about the future, well, we do not say what the future will be of democracy in the book. We just provide an idea of how to come up with an alternative, or how we can transform democracy in such a way, if people still like democracy, I don't, but to transform democracy in such a way that even their proponents are not confronted with the negative effects that we describe in the book.
Is this what the More Freedom Foundation is about?
Well, the More Freedom Foundation is just an organization that was founded 10 years ago by me. And it would publish articles and translate articles and put them on the internet, organize events. We did have some freedom radio in the Netherlands, designed and sold some merchandise like T-shirts and stuff. We appeared in the media to put forward our ideas on liberty. And luckily, this has, more people and more organizations have come out of it. So that's good. But there wasn't a Mises Institute anymore, yet. So we founded that a few months ago. But yes, the More Freedom Foundation was just like any libertarian organization, promoting freedom through articles and books and translations.
Yes, what are the activities of the newly founded Mises Institute in the Netherlands?
Well, it's actually quite different. Our inaugural meeting was more successful than we expected. There were 120 people signing up to attend. So that was far more than we expected, and it was very successful. And together with my co-founder, we decided to focus not so much on articles, because a lot has been written already, of course, academically, but also popularly. And this has put on the internet so everybody can read it. And there's little reason to do that again, or to elaborate on that. I think it's important at this stage that we organize meetings, and also because we just like to organize them and we like to attend them. And so we have our next conference planned for the 7th of September. And that's pretty much the focus. International connections, networking, we will do. We will go to the PFS meeting this year in Bodrum, organized by Hans Herman Hoppe. It's the Property and Freedom Society. And yes, so we will not focus so much on articles.
And do you continue your focus on this idea that you put forward in your book, namely transforming democracy into something more palatable and more friendly to the ideals of freedom, or was it just something you wrote in your book and nobody, including you, continues any activity in that area?
Well, the Mises Institute and the book are not connected in any way. I mean, it's not But the Mises Institute might be a vehicle, amongst others, to promote the book further, get in contact with international organizations. But the book is a private matter more, together with my co-author, of course, and Mises is separate from that.
Yes, but my question was what's being done, except for promoting the book, to actually turn this idea of transforming democracy into something better, into
Oh, yes.
practice.
Well, the thing is that I'm not in favor of transforming democracy. Ideally, I mean, I think democracy is a bad idea anyway. But if people think, well, we need to keep this democracy, we come with proposals to transform it. But I'm not in favor of democracy. I'm in favor of individual freedom. And I wouldn't mind, for myself then, democracy being abolished.
So that was an idea which you're not going to pursue yourself, but it's an idea that some of those people who still favor democracy can agree with and act on them. Right?
Yes, exactly. Many times when I explain the problems of democracy, people agree with me. But they don't see the alternative that we propose because it's so foreign to them. It's so completely different from what they ever thought. So they feel comfortable with democracy, but once they see also the problems, they say, well, can't we transform it? And I say, well, the only way to transform it is to break it up. Have competing democracies, because democracy works worse the bigger it gets. And because democracy is like going out for dinner with about 100 people and deciding up front that the bill will be split evenly. In that case, everybody has a strong incentive to order more than he would normally would, individually. And this will result in an enormously high bill that no one wanted, but no individual can do anything about. For instance, if you order a dessert of 10 euros or $10, then you will only have to pay 10 cents of that, and 99% is paid by the others. And of course, the others feel the same way, so they order more too. But once the tables you have a table with 5 people, you have more social control, or you can vote with your feet. You can say, "Oh, this table they don't order that much, so the bill will be far more limited than the other table." And so you have more control. You have a smaller gap between ruler and ruled, and you can vote with your feet a bit more instead of with your pencil in democracy.
So, do you propose to do it on a geographical basis?
Do you mean that to split up democracies? You mean?
Yes.
Not necessarily. I mean, well, that would be easiest for most people. But well, they can split up how they like it, how they would like it. But geographically, it's generally easiest. But also, people can break up because they belong to a different religion. For instance, we saw that but that's also geographically generally. Yeah? But not necessarily. An example of splitting up is the Switzerland, like you mentioned earlier on. There was this canton. It has 26 cantons, and there was one in the 1970s. There was the big canton of Bern. It was German-speaking, and I think it was Protestant or Catholic. And there was this French minority of Bern that was of another religion, and after some voting, they seceded and formed their own canton. And I think that is a very good way. But of course, people can say, "Well, you don't have to have a good reason to secede." In my opinion, you can just say, "Well, I don't like it anymore." You don't have to say, well, we secede because we have a different religion or we have a different language or whatever. But generally, this will be the case that people secede because of geographical reasons, religious reasons, or linguistic reasons.
Are there any parties in the Netherlands that promote freedom and that have lots of libertarian ideas in their political program?
Well, of course, we have the general liberals, that's not the same as the liberals in the United States. This is more on the right, but of course they disappoint every time, and they're now they have been the biggest party in the Netherlands, but in fact they want more money too. But there's another party, and that is the Libertarian Party, and that participated too in the elections of last year, but it did get very few votes. So, but of course, its leader is completely libertarian, and shares all the ideas that I have, or that general libertarians have. So yes, but it's very small, and I don't see a change coming anytime soon. In that regard, it won't grow very much.
Well, in Poland, there is also a libertarian party being formed right now as we speak. They're collecting signatures in order to be registered and officially recognized as a political party. And there is also a party founded last year, Demokracja Bezpośrednia, the direct democracy, which has some ideas about splitting democracy. Not exactly ones like you described, but they're quite similar. And I can say that already that probably later this month, in April, there will be another episode of this show with two guests, one from the Partia Libertariańska, the Polish Libertarian Party, and one from Demokracja Bezpośrednia. But I can't announce the date yet.
Yes. Well, it's interesting you mentioned direct democracy, because people think that, we should transform democracy, we should improve democracy. And one way we could do that is through direct democracy, through referenda, like they say in Switzerland, Volksinitiative. And Volksinitiative, probably your listeners do not know what that means, but it means that the people themselves can ask for a referendum, so they don't have to depend on the rulers issuing a referendum.
Well, it's a hot issue actually now in Poland, so the listeners know about it, and it's in Poland you have to collect 500,000 signatures, and even then it's still optional, not mandatory. It's still optional for the Sejm. That's the lower chamber, but with more competences in the Polish Parliament to proceed on that and to actually vote whether to make it into law.
I see. Well, what I can say regarding direct democracy, I don't think it has a better moral basis, foundation than parliamentary democracy, and I think it might be a way of controlling government. I mean, in the Netherlands we had a referendum that was not binding and regarding the EU, and there was 2/3 were against it, and they just brushed it aside and went through with it anyway. So in a direct democracy with binding referenda, you wouldn't have that problem. So it is a way of controlling the rulers, but it is not a way of gaining more liberty, because you could still have, you have still the majority rule. So it will not prevent people from taking away your liberty.
Okay, and I remind all of you that you're listening to Kontestacja Internet Radio, and this is Krzysztof Maczyński, or Chris for short, speaking to you from Bielsko-Biała, and our guest on this live show, the special episode of the hearing Gość miesiąca, guest of the month, is Frank Karsten, author of Beyond Democracy, founder of the Dutch Mises Institute and the More Freedom Foundation. We'll have a short break now. I remind you that after that break filled with music, you'll still be able to call us using either Skype, kontestacja.com, or phone 222-195-321 to ask your question if you wish live, or you can do it on chat, which is at chat.kontestacja.com. And now I invite you to listen to a song which is a personal favorite of Frank's, which is entitled Beta, written by Peter Slacher and performed by the band Bluff, of which he's a member. And it's about joy and affirmation of life, values that many libertarians hold dear, because that's what freedom allows to the greatest possible extent. So we'll be back with you after this song, which takes 3 minutes and 36 seconds.
Wachten tot de zon opkomt is een manier om altijd
And we're back with Frank Karsten on Kontestacja Internet Radio, the show Guest of the Month, and we're continuing the subject of, democracy, and then we'll, for the final minutes of the show, then we'll focus on what the future holds for the Dutch and for all of us in Europe. But first, let me tell you and tell our listeners about what this Polish party, Direct Democracy, also proposes is to base their... because it's not very practical to have a referenda every week, because even on the internet, which you could use for voting. But it's not very practical. Most people simply don't care about each issue that's being voted and decided whether to make it a law or not. So they plan to use something called liquid democracy. Have you heard about it?
No, I haven't.
Well, it's a system whereby you can appoint somebody to vote for you. And you can revoke it at any time, not every 4 years or 5 or whatever. You can grant in all areas or in some specific areas your vote as an addition of power of vote to somebody else whom you trust and whom you believe that is a specialist on that.
I see. But it can be any citizen, or it can be must it be a politician, or what?
Well, any citizen, but of course those who would collect much trust and the power of votes in thousands or tens of thousands would automatically become politicians.
I see.
But the crucial thing is that it can be revoked at any time and assigned to either yourself or somebody else.
But once it is revoked, I mean, the politicians or the people in power, they take decisions, and once there is no majority anymore because many votes are revoked, then
people
laws are still
if you revoke the right to vote for you from somebody, you have it back. You can vote yourself, but the power of this vote the weight of this vote will be just one. Or you can transfer it from the person from which you revoked it to somebody else whom you decided is more trustworthy.
Yes, well, it might be a nice idea, but it still suffers from the same moral objection of majority rule, that as an individual, you don't want to be ruled by the majority. You want to be ruled by yourself. The alternative to majority rule is self-rule, which is freedom. And however we start changing democracy, it still suffers from the problem of majority rule and the problem of force. So, in my opinion, this will not improve much.
Well, that's just one possible idea. If democracy is to be retained, I think it's interesting. So now, for the final part of this hearing, let's focus on the future, and we have a third question, which is also from Jezier, sent by email. And the question is, I would like to ask you about our future, how Europe will look like in long period of time, and what might happen with our civilization. I think in this context it's about whether we'll still have democracy and the European Union with not so much democracy, because actually the European Parliament, which has elected members, has less say than the self-appointed small body of commissioners, the European Commission. Do you see it as a viable perspective to continue indefinitely, or do you forecast some major changes?
Well, I don't think that the democratic decision model will go away, because in principle there's not necessarily anything wrong with democracy rule. It's just wrong that people are forced to be part of it. For instance, we have a tennis club and it's democratically governed. But that is no problem, because if you don't like the results, you just, you go out and start your own tennis club, or you go to another one, or you stop tennising at all. So, and you see the democratic decision model also in companies. So in that regard, I don't think that the model itself will disappear. What I would like to see disappear is the democracy, large-scale democracies, because that's what we have now in most democratic countries, and I want it to be replaced by freedom. So that is one part of the question. The other part is, how do you see the future? The future, well, we see the problems with our European democracy. You said, well, it's not really a democracy, but, well, we do vote for the European Parliament, and they elect the commissioners. So, of course, that is pretty much the same as with the parliamentary democracy in the Netherlands. We don't vote on what ministers we would like to have. They're elected by the people we elect. So we see the problems. The problems of democracy become bigger once democracy gets bigger. So we see that now with the European Union. Democracy is a large redistribution scheme, which results in power concentration. And you see that with the European Union. And the redistribution, as it was normally before the European Union, nationally, and now you see an international redistribution of money and power, now from the north to the south. And you see that, you notice that this is resulting into enormous problems. So, yes, I think the future of European Union is not democracy, and it's not large scale. And I think the future of the world is into being split up into more autonomous areas. But I'm not certain that, of course, but I think it has a good chance of evolving in that direction.
And how about the Netherlands? Do you think that your country will follow after the rest of Europe and the world, or will it actually become a leader which will turn into the direction of freedom more quickly than others?
I'm not so certain about that. Currently, we are very Eurosceptic. There are many Eurosceptic in the Netherlands because we are a net contributor to the European Union, and so that doesn't go down well with people, with voters. But I don't think we'll play a pioneering role in that, in freedom anymore. No. I think the new areas in the world, like Shenzhen in China, a special economic zone, or Dubai, are far more likely to be a guiding light for more freedom for the rest of the world. So new states like Qatar, and I'm not saying that it's ideal, certainly not. But if you go to Dubai, for instance, you have no income tax and you have no corporate tax, and well, I think that is fantastic, and they provide an inspiration for the rest of the world and see what they achieve. And many Poles, it's populated by many foreigners from Poland, India, the Netherlands. So I think these countries will provide an initiative and a push towards more freedom.
Well, one aspect in which they don't set a good example, most Arab countries and China, is religious freedom, unfortunately.
Yes, that is true. Although the examples I gave are pretty much better than the other Arab countries. So I'm certainly saying there's a lack of personal freedom in many regards. But I'm glad that there's so that should not be an inspiration. But other aspects of these countries can be an inspiration, and we should combine the best of various models. And of course, there's another movement That is, for instance, in Honduras, people come up with the idea of starting a special economic zone in Honduras with its own economic regulation, very limited.
Well, I'm afraid that I'm afraid not anymore. I'm afraid that this effort failed.
Yes,
it was mentioned and discussed in depth a few times on the show Jan Fior Zaprasza, which is the same, by the way, the same Jan Fior, only his name is written with one R, unlike the name of the company Fior Publishing.
Yes, that is correct.
Your book. And he also has a show on Wednesdays, on Wednesday evenings at 9 p.m. on Contestacja, and he discussed it twice. One when it was.
Well, you are correct. You are correct that it didn't go through. It didn't succeed. But of course, well, it is an example, and the fact that it was considered seriously is an indication of its future success, because I think the idea is still there, and it is growing. So I expect some similar initiative to develop somewhere else. And we have already seen.
I would like to see it in Poland, and I would like my region to be selected for that. Certainly.
Yes, I can imagine. Same applies to the Netherlands, in my opinion. So, of course, it was a disappointment that it didn't succeed, but I expect this idea to be revived again. And these are areas, because they're so small and they're so easy to see that they're very successful, can provide a very good example for the rest of the world. And I think the same applies to Shenzhen in China. It was a small fisherman village in 1997, and then it became a special economic zone, and it's now a mega city with 10 million people. And I think, I think that is likely to. It provided inspiration to the Chinese rulers to grant more freedoms to the rest of China.
Great. So to finish with, could you give us an appetizer and encouragement to the listeners to go to the Asbiro seminar, where you'll be one of the two key speakers? And do you already know what you're going to talk about? If yes, please.
Well, I didn't get the opportunity to speak now or on what is wrong with democracy, because I didn't explain very much on that. I indicated on some issues, but I will explain a lot on why democracy fails and on what grounds, and what the trends are regarding freedom, the historical trends after a century of democracy in the Western world. Yes, that is something that is important. That is the basis of the book, 13 Myths of Democracy, and why it doesn't work. And I will, elaborate on that during my talk in Warsaw.
So if you'd like to go there, it's on the 19th and 20th of May next month. Until the 15th of April, you can book for half the price. So if you're interested, we encourage you to do so, and to buy the book Mity Demokracji, or in some other language, like in the original English, Beyond Democracy, or in Polish from Fior Publishing. Thank you very much for joining us on Contestacja Internet Radio on the show Gość miesiąca. Our guest was Frank Karsten from the Netherlands, author of Beyond Democracy, founder of Stichting Meer Vrijheid and Mises Institute Netherlands.
Thank you. Thank you for having me. It's been a pleasure.
Live long and prosper, as they say, in a better universe.
Likewise.
And good night to all of you. I leave you with a song in Polish by Martin Lechowicz, one of the two founders of Contestacja, entitled Hymn o Wolności, which is Polish for Hymn of Freedom.
Z wysokiej góry ujrzałem ich. Szli z daleka jak duchy przeszłości. Ze spokojem na twarzach szli mieszkańcy cmentarza weteranów na służbie wolności. Zza horyzontu wychylali się, żeby dojrzeć następców swych pościg. Choć odeszli już dawno, oświetlają latarnią nasze kroki na drodze wolności. Gdzieś na tej drodze my będziemy też płacić cenę swej przyszłej wielkości. Przejmujemy z pokorą, że nam wszystko odbiorą, wszystko oprócz naszej wolności. Nie będziemy przeliczać jej kryteriami opłacalności. Tak jak ci, co przed nami, nigdy się nie sprzedamy. Nie ma ceny za życie wolności. Ludzka wola zawsze wolna jest. Sam Bóg praw sobie do niej nie rości. Boska czy ludzka władza, niechaj nikt się nie zgadza, by choć cząstkę swej oddać wolności. I nie zrobimy ani kroku w tył, gdy rzucone zostaną już kości. Ze spokojem na twarzach my będziemy powtarzać: daj nam śmierć, jeśli nie dasz wolności.